You too, and very good evening, everyone. Welcome back once again to MSBS Weekly Guided Meditation by Phra Goh. Today is the 23rd of May 2023. We'd like to extend a great welcome to all new viewers to this channel. We are very grateful to have MN18 Adhibalo to conduct this weekly guided meditation session. MN18 was ordained under the Theravada tradition of Thai Dhamma sect at Santi Forest Presbytery in Johor in 2008. MN18 is currently the religious advisor to Buddhist Youth Network Singapore. Today we are continuing on the topic of the ball of honey, Sutta Majjhima Nikaya 18. MN18 will be leading the homage to Buddha and taking a 5 precept for Buddhists. Now let's compose our minds, put our palms together and welcome MN18. Over to you, MN18.
Okay, thank you, Terence. So we are going to start off by paying respects to the Buddha 3 times. So you do a first bow, second bow, and third bow. Homage chant. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. 3 refuges. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Saṅghāṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. And the 5 precepts. Pāṇātipātā vīramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Adinādāna vīramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Kāmesu miccācārā vīramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Musāvādā vīramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Suramēraya majjapamādāṭhāna vīramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, so good evening to everyone. So we are back again in this topic. The Ball of Honey Sutta basically is talking about this perception independent origination. And normally the 12 links of dependent origination doesn't really mention much about perception. So this particular sutta sort of talks about perception in detail. So last week we've covered on the Buddha's statement, how does this perception lead all the way to conflict. So we skip all this part, skip. Okay, so this is the statement made by the Buddha. So again, just a refresher, because this will be sort of repeated sort of many times. So the Buddha started off with perception, right? Basically, you can just look at the underlined words. Once a person has perception and categories of objectification, the person, if they do not welcome, if they do not relish these perceptions and they do not entertain these perceptions, they will end obsessions with passions and all those stuff, resistance, views, uncertainty, becoming, and everything. And because they end all these obsessions, they end taking, it's called the end of taking up of rods and bladed weapons. So they end all arguments and all these suffering, all these unskillful things cease without remainder. So ceasing is cessation, the third noble truth, cessation of suffering. So that's like the end goal in Buddhism. We want to end suffering, so we want to cease suffering. Yeah? So this is cessation of suffering. And the Buddha left. So he basically explained the second half of the dependent origination. So if you look at the next slide. So these are 12 links. So perception sort of come right before craving, before welcoming. Yeah, so the welcome in red is actually craving, the left corner of the wheel, left bottom corner of the wheel. So the wheel again is sort of start from the 12 o'clock direction, starting from ignorance all the way and sort of ends with aging and death. So it works like the clock. So it goes clockwise. So the Buddha started explaining from perceptions, which is right before craving, welcoming, attachment is obsessions, and there's becoming. And once there's becoming, then one will have these arguments, quarrels, which actually is the suffering, like birth, aging, sickness, and death. And if you want to go further, one may even talk about the beginning, the first two links, ignorance and mental formations, or even verbal formations because of arguments, quarrels, disputes. That's part of fabrication, part of sankhara, part of formation, part of creating karma. Yeah. Okay, somebody entering my room. Okay, so so that's the 12 links. Yeah. So the 12 links, the Buddha covered the perception, craving link all the way until mental formations. Yeah, so this is the Buddha statement, and we are going to move on next. Next slide. So today we'll cover something new content about these monks. I'll just read through this statement. Then, not long after the Blessed One had left, the thought occurred to the monks. This brief statement the Blessed One made, after which he went into his dwelling without analyzing the detailed meaning, i.e., if with regard to the cause whereby the perceptions and categories of objectification assail a person, there is nothing to relish, and the whole entire statement, right? That is where this evil, unskillful thing cease without remainder. So basically, the monks have no idea what the Buddha said, or the monks do not understand what the Buddha meant by his statement. Now, who might analyze the unanalyzed detailed meaning of this brief statement? So they think, since the Buddha go back, it's impolite to call him out again. So you have to wait for the next time he officially comes out for his sort of Dhamma teaching. So at the meantime, they need to look for someone to explain this teaching. So next slide. So again, the same person we've covered before in one of the previous suttas. Then the thought occurred to them, Venerable Maha Kaccana is praised by the teacher and esteemed by his observant companions in the holy life. He is capable of analyzing the unanalyzed, detailed meaning of this brief statement. Suppose we will go to him and on arrival cross-question him about this matter. Okay, so they are going to look for this Venerable Maha Kaccana, the foremost in explaining short statements made by the Buddha. So that's his specialty, and he's the foremost disciple in doing it. So the monks went to Venerable Maha Kaccana and on arrival exchanged courteous greetings with him. After an exchange of friendly greetings and courtesy, they sat to one side. As they were sitting there, they told him what had happened and added, "Analyze the meaning, Venerable Maha Kaccana." So they were saying, the Buddha left, and this is the next best person to go to, which is Venerable Maha Kaccana. Okay, next slide. So Venerable Maha Kaccana replied, "Friends, it's as if a man needing hardwood, looking for hardwood, wandering in search of hardwood, passing over the root and trunk of a standing tree, possessing hardwood, were to imagine that hardwood should be sought among its branches and leaves. So it is with you, who, having bypassed the Blessed One, when you were face to face with him, the teacher, imagine that I should be asked about this matter." Alright, so this Venerable Maha Kaccana is giving an analogy of this Dhamma being the trunk, the main trunk of the tree. The main trunk of the tree. So somebody want to chop a tree, right? You want to get the wood. So instead of getting the main trunk, they look for the branches and the twigs and the leaves. So Venerable Maha Kaccana is saying that he is actually the disciple. He's like the branches and the twigs. You should go and ask the Buddha instead. He's the main trunk. He's the source of the Dhamma. Okay, so I'll continue reading. "For knowing the Blessed One knows, seeing he sees, he is the I, he is knowledge, he is Dhamma, he is Brahma, he is the creator of these teachings. He is the speaker, the proclaimer, the elucidator of meaning, the giver of the deathless, the Lord of the Dhamma, the Tathagata." Tathagata means, the direct translation means suchness. The Buddha sees things as such. So that's the enlightened mind. And interestingly, the term Tathagata can be used on Arahants as well, other enlightened monks. If they are enlightened, that state of mind is also called Tathagata. "That was the time when you should have cross-questioned him about this matter. However he answered, that was how you should have remembered it." Right, so Venerable Maha Kaccana is telling the monks, next time you shouldn't be shy. You should straight away ask the Buddha. He's the teacher after all. Next. So the monks, in defense, they try to explain their position. Yes, friend, Kaccana, knowing the Blessed One knows, he sees, he's the I, he's the knowledge, the Dhamma, the Brahma. He's the speaker, proclaimer, elucidator of meaning, the giver of deathlessness, the Lord of the Dhamma, the Tathagata. So basically the monks acknowledge what the Venerable Maha Kaccana was saying, that the Buddha is the main teacher. That was the time when we should have cross-questioned him about this matter. However he answered, that was how we should have remembered it. But you are praised by the teacher and esteemed by your observant companions in the holy life. You are capable of analyzing the unanalyzed detailed meaning of this brief statement. Analyze the meaning, Venerable Maha Kaccana, without making it difficult. So they are trying to say, please explain in a way they can understand. Make it simple, because the Buddha explained too chim for them. So my explanation, I don't know, maybe it might be too chim also. Who find it too chim? Is it digestible? I am not as good as Venerable Maha Kaccana, so must pardon me. In that case, my friends, listen and pay close attention. I will speak. As you say, friend, the monks responded to him. Okay, so now this is the turn where Venerable Makachana will give his explanation. What is these objectifications and these perceptions? Next. Okay, so I don't have to read this entire statement. So basically, Venerable Makachana is repeating the entire statement which the Buddha made. He's trying to sort of verify this is the actual statement first before making his analysis. So this is the entire statement, the one which is underlined, which is the monks were questioning about. Right? Okay, next. Okay, so Venerable Makachana is trying to analyze the dependent co-arising of perceptions. So he start off with right from close to the beginning, dependent on I and forms, I consciousness arise. So consciousness is actually the third link of dependent origination. Don't have to worry, I'll show the diagram again later. So you just take note of the underlined words. Okay, so dependent on your I and forms, I consciousness arise. So this again, very common formula talking about how our cognitive function works, or the process of our cognition. So it normally starts off with you need to have something physical. You need to have your eye, dependent on your organ, your sense organ, for example, your eye, and the forms. Forms are actually the objects you can see, and because these objects exist, your eye exists, I consciousness arise. So this is the formula. And interestingly, they don't start off with consciousness first. They start off with dependent on I and forms, I consciousness arise. So that's the common formula of this sixth sense consciousness. Okay, the meeting of the three is contact. So when the I, the forms, and the I consciousness meet, this is called contact. So I will call this focused attention. Focused attention. All the while we are aware of many things, but there's awareness. There is lots of things going on, but we may not be, or rather, we are not omniscient. We are not all-knowing. We do not know everything occurring every moment. I always give this example. And right now, if you're listening to what I'm saying, you're using your ear consciousness, right? So that is ear contact of your ear consciousness. But simultaneously, maybe your heart is beating, but you weren't aware of your heart beating. There's no contact. But only when I mention of your heart beating, then you start to pay notice. You start to take notice. Oh, my heart is beating, right? So that is contact of your body consciousness, your heart beating. So again, likewise, there are many things occurring. Only when there's contact, then we are aware of it. Okay, with contact as a requisite condition, there is feeling. Right? So when there's focused attention, then more details start to form. So there is this thing called feeling, whether you find it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is feeling. And next, perception will come to play. When one feels, one perceives. Labels in the mind. So you give labels. What is this object? Why is it nice? So perception in Pali language is called sanya. And some people translate it as memory. So you need to depend on your memory, your data bank. What are the words you learned before? You want to give a label. What are your experience in the past? Have you encountered such incident before in your past? And then you also try to make sense of it. What one perceives, one thinks about. So because of past incident that you think, when one thinks about, one complicates. So the more you think, the more dramas, you make it more complicated, the more worries, more anticipation. Based on what a person complicates, the perceptions and categories of objectification assail him or her with regard to past, present, and future forms recognizable via the eye. So when you see something, the initial sight, the forms itself, no suffering. The object, the screen in front of you, no suffering, no complication, right? It is only through our thinking and our analysis, and we start to complicate things, then this object you see start to make you more confused or more give you a headache, more doubt even. So these are things that make you suffer through complication and thinking. Okay, and that's the same with the other sense doors. Whatever you hear, whatever you smell, you taste, think, and touch, and the mind, whatever one perceives. For example, maybe someone is escaping from danger. So they are, let's say, chased after by some people. So if, let's say, they're hiding in a corner of a street inside a room, and they hear noises outside, then they start to think, is it somebody want to attack me? So that is thinking, complication through thinking. All right, like maybe in the wild, animals, they want to survive. They always act in a very afraid. They always act in a, how do you call this? Survival mode, fight or flight instinct. Every time they eat a bit only, they need to look for danger. Always very careful. So this is complication through thinking, perception. So in a way, this is actually sort of part of survival. This is part of samsara. We need to have this function for survival. But overcomplication will give too much mental stress and suffering. So the idea now is how to reduce or overcome this mental suffering. Okay, next. Okay, so now we have come to another interesting translation by Ajahn Jeff. I'll just read through. Now when there is the I, when there are forms, when there is I consciousness, it is possible that one will delineate, a delineation of contact. Right, so delineate, based on maybe the dictionary, it would mean to specify, to make a demarcation, right? Basically to give more detail, something like this, around this line. So that's the idea. When there is a delineation of contact, it is possible one will delineate a delineation of feeling. Okay, so basically this entire process talks about this delineation with overthinking and suffering. So let's go to the previous slide again. So this process itself probably is talking about the natural process without delineation. That means without putting attention to detail. And the next slide. Same process, but they add this thing called delineate a delineation of contact, then delineate a delineation of feeling. Then afterwards, next you have delineate a delineation of perception. So give more detail. You sort of complicate things further, and delineate a delineation of thinking, right? And once there is a delineation of thinking, it is possible that one will delineate a delineation of being assailed by the perceptions and categories of objectification, right? So if let's say you are paying attention to the talk, to the screen, there's still thoughts going on in the mind, lots of thoughts in the mind. But only when we pay attention to our thoughts, and then we are giving this delineation of this being assailed by the perceptions and the dramas and the stories of the mind. Yeah, putting too much attention to detail. So I'm trying to put this in terms of like the Four Noble Truths. So the first one is like the previous process talks about just the process itself without craving. And this process in this current slide, talking about delineation, talks about when there's like craving involved. Okay, next. Now this third slide talks about cessation. Cessation. When there is no I, when there are no forms, when there is no I consciousness, it is impossible that one will delineate a delineation of contact. Yeah, so basically they're saying the cessation, if there's no I, no forms, no I consciousness, then it will not start the domino effect. It won't start this avalanche of these processes. Okay, so once there's no delineation of contact, then there's no delineation of feeling. No delineation of feeling, then there's no delineation of perception. No delineation of perception, then there's no delineation of thinking. And when there's no delineation of thinking, then a person won't get assailed by perceptions and categories of objectification. So that's his analysis. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so what has this Venerable Maha covered? He has covered about this consciousness. So if you look at like the 2 or 3 o'clock from the wheel, right? Consciousness. Once there's consciousness, then there's contact. And once there's contact, then there's feeling. Right? So the contact is based on these few things, your mind and matter. You need the matter, which is your your sense organs. That's the matter part. And you also need the external objects. And the mind is basically your thinking, your consciousness. So that's mind matter at play. And once a person has mind matter, 6 senses, they have contact, then they will have feeling. So Venerable Maha explained in detail, after feeling, he tries to analyze this thing called perception, which the Buddha did not analyze. So Venerable Maha is trying to analyze what complicates this perception. So once there's perception, then there's thinking. And when you think upon your perception, then there is this thing called the perceptions and categories of this papancha. Papancha means proliferation. That means you sort of build like a mountain out of a molehill. So that is this papancha. Okay, so this is the 12 links. So the Buddha explained the second half from craving all the way to verbal formations, and Venerable Maha explained consciousness all the way to these perceptions. So that's the entire wheel, the 12, actually there's more than 12 based on this sutta, but yeah, So this kind of explains the whole process of dependent origination. Any questions at the moment? I stop the talk for today. Now it's 9 o'clock. So as you can see, these processes happen like every moment, every second. You think about your perception, then you complicate, you create more dramas. Then if let's say you react upon the dramas, you start to scold, start to create arguments, fight with another person. It happens all in one lifetime. You don't have to wait for the next lifetime. You don't have to wait for the previous lifetime. And once you create more heated argument, then again, more contact with the person and argument, how you want to reply, you react further, and it goes round and round. So it happens every moment. Okay, so any questions on the floor? Yes, Terence.
Looking at this, if it goes clockwise, how come is you see the rises of consciousness only comes matter and senses. But if you see here, you have the senses and the form, then only the consciousness arise.
Yeah, very good. Yeah. Okay, so this is the interesting way to put it. So chronologically, right, if a person start to when the Buddha was contemplating on dependent origination at the very, very initial level, sort of like at the eve of enlightenment, or rather 1 week after his enlightenment, he uses these jhanas. He went through all the first to 8 jhana to cessation to understand the cessation formula. And once he come back down from cessation, imagine if the Buddha or the Arahant reach cessation. Example, they entered the 8th jhana and went beyond. So that's cessation. And after cessation, basically, it's like rebooting, resetting the system. There's no ignorance, no mental formation, no consciousness, everything. So this entire wheel sort of cease. And in their meditation routine, he have to normally go up and down the jhana. So after he reach cessation, which is the 9th level, then he go back down to the 8th level. So once there's 8th level, it comes back to this consciousness again. There's thinking again. So there's mental formations, and then there's this awareness, there's this consciousness, and there's this formless kind of concentrations. So he sort of based this dependent origination based on the refinement of the mind, from the refined mind to a gross mind. So hopefully they kind of make sense. So this is, I'm using this, the late Venerable Dr. Punaji's explanation. He's trying to say that if the Buddha or any enlightened monk, enlightened practitioner, they descend from the jhanas, then they start to have the mental formations again. They start to aware. But because in jhanas, they're quite withdrawn from the senses, so they are not really reacting to the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body contact, body consciousness. So the only consciousness they are involved is the jhana consciousness, jhanic consciousness. So they are not reacting to your eye, they are not reacting to the ear, they are not reacting to the dramas or thoughts even. So basically they are in this a kind of this jhanic consciousness, they call it. There is awareness, but they are aware of the jhanas, not of the 6 senses. So that's the explanation I can think of. So once they descend from the jhanas back to the normal sense sphere, from the 8th jhana all the way to the 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and back to 0, Then they start to react again to the senses. That's where all the mind matter, six senses, contact come into play. Yeah, so hopefully that kind of makes sense. Okay, Karina, you have something?
Yeah, Bhante. So, Bhante, could it be like, if let's say based on the six senses that we usually contact, right? We contacted. So, is it possible if we would stop at the feeling, be it like happy, not happy, or whatever, not stop there without any perception? I mean, we perceive that through my eyes and I see Bhante, right? And then I don't even like go into like I like, I don't like, or even go into the perceive that male, female, just knowing that it is a Bhante. So would it go into like perception, and then go into thinking? So possible, are we able to stop at the feeling, meaning there and knowing only?
That won't be quite possible for the ground-up approach. So even in many suttas, there's this thing called the 10 perceptions, or even perception of inconstancy, perception of impermanence. It's a kind of perception also. So basically, we're using skillful perception, skillful thinking to overcome unskillful thinking, unskillful perceptions. So that's the whole idea. So I always like to use the Zen story to try to simplify things. The Zen poem, this Zen master, he wrote a poem, 看山是山, see mountains as mountains. That's first line. Second line, he writes, see mountains as not mountains. And the third line, he writes, see mountains as mountains. And then initially I read really like, what kind of nonsense in this? But actually, that is the, we call this the evolution or the progression of how one practices. So initially, a non-practitioner, an untrained person, see mountains as mountains. Oh, this laptop very nice lah. What brand? Is it a cheapskate? Is it expensive? That kind of stuff. So they seeing things the normal way. You see mountains, or mountain very grand. Wow, so nice. Can take photo, very Instagrammable. Wow, very nice. And so this is normal way of seeing things. See mountains as mountains. And the next stage is when you start to learn the Dhamma, start to learn Buddhism. When you start to apply, start to practice, you have to see mountains as not mountains. So you have to use the various perceptions. The mountain is made of 4 elements, and the mountain is impermanent, that kind of stuff. Yeah? So you don't see the mountains as the normal way you see it. You have to use another kind of perception to replace your habitual perception. So basically, you're reprogramming your mind to create a new habit. And third line, see mountains as mountains. That is, after you've done that, if let's say a person reached enlightenment, then they don't have to purposely do it already. The mind already free. Then they can sort of stay with the awareness. Yeah, there's another simile of the raft. Initially, they need a raft to cross the other shore. Once they reach the other shore, they don't have to purposely, use the raft and row the raft anymore.
So Bhante, can I rephrase that? From my understanding, it's like when achieve the enlightenment, right? Meaning, when we see the human, right? No longer male, female, you, me, him, or whatever. No, it's just a form. Can I take it as an example?
Yeah, that is a kind of perception. Yeah, so every moment you have to perceive things as form, as the 4 elements. That is to reduce craving. So ultimately, your indicator is to look at your craving and suffering. If by practicing, by imposing a certain perception, you get more stressful, then something is wrong. You need to adjust.
Correct. Okay. So one thing you also mentioned about 10 perceptions, right? Maybe perhaps maybe you can share with us.
Okay. Yeah. Probably the next sutta. because there's already another sutta on Q. Cindy was asking about 5 aggregates. So I'll talk about 5 aggregates in relation again to this dependent origination. Yeah.
Thank you, Bhante. Sadhu.
Okay, all right. So the next one in Q is these 10 perceptions. Okay. Any other questions?
Hi, Bhante.
Oh, okay, so many. Okay, maybe Cindy first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, Bhante. Can I check with you? That means if, let's say, there is a absence of just any one of them, like there's absence of feeling, that means perception will not arise.
Absence of feeling. Yeah, interestingly, absence of feeling. There, yeah, if a person there's a cessation from the rest, then in a way, yes, no perception.
Okay, that means, okay, even though if the person has the contact, okay, let's say, okay, somebody just touched me, okay, but I do not allow the feeling to revolve around me. That means there's no perception.
Yeah, you need to reflect in a way to not to sort of seize the perception. So
okay.
you need
So,
right thought. Yeah.
Okay, so long as I do not actually entertain the feeling, that means even though there's contact, but I don't entertain to that feeling, that means there's no perception. Once there's no perception, there's no craving.
Yeah, sometimes it could be due to lack of paying attention to the stimuli of somebody, knocking into you. That could be one possibility. For example, somebody is so focused in work, and maybe your colleague tell you, hey, now we start to close shop already, end work already, knock off already. You never hear, right? So that is being focused, but that doesn't necessarily mean one sort of reduce or overcome craving. Yeah, the craving is still with that particular attention they are paying attention to, their current focus. Their clinging and craving is to that particular object at that time. Yeah.
That means if a person stay focused, craving and clinging still arise.
Arise to that theme, to that object. Yeah, not to the person banging you. Yeah.
But Bhante, how to seize perception? Is it that we have to live our daily life in a jhanatic way? That means just to aware of the thing and do not cultivate the rest of the things that comes along,
Okay,
like the senses, contact, feeling.
So in daily life, right, normal recommendation is either the sublime states or impermanence.
Okay, so that means we have to, each time whenever that we're aware of something, that means we straight away cultivate the impermanence or the loving kindness.
Yep.
To stop the rest from forming.
In a way, yes, in a way.
Okay. Okay, understand. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay,
Thank you.
Hi, Karina. Okay, maybe Seitat has a question. We let Seitat ask first.
Bhante, somewhat similar, but I want to kind of ask this from a little bit of different angle. Based on this ring, the 6 senses is one of it that would cause the chain reaction. And the last slide, it seems to suggest that when there's no I, and then so the subsequent reaction would not happen. It sounds like if we don't have these 6 senses, we will cease everything. And if that's the case, when we die, we don't have this kind of physical senses.
Okay.
Then we won't have this kind of chain reaction, and there won't be reborn, which doesn't quite make sense. Yeah, I'm just thinking about might not be that dependent on the senses, thinking about our dreams and things like that, we still could kind of see and maybe hear, quote unquote. So just to ask this question.
Okay.
The discrepancy.
Yeah. So the teaching of dependent origination is avoiding the extremes of nihilism. Yeah. So and also avoiding the extremes of eternalism. So there are people who, there are practitioners even in the Buddha's time that treat ending of suffering. If there's no I, then they really, really sort of destroy their organs. They damage their organs. So the Buddha criticized them. So that's not the way to transcend the senses. Yeah, the proper word should be transcend the senses, not to remove the senses. So if a person were to physically try to damage or remove their sense organs, that's not the way to overcome suffering. Yeah, because no matter how you remove, then there's still the brain, there's still the mind. So like what you mentioned, even if a person they pass away, the habitual craving is still there. So even if there's like a next lifetime, then it's still repetition of this habit.
Yeah, so in that sense, the mind, I don't know which part is that, the mental formation in, let's say, we don't have the physical body, and the part that create that so-called consciousness is the one that lead to the feeling, the contact and the feeling in that sense.
Yeah, so actually consciousness will operate with or without the senses. But because our senses are working and we are living in the sense sphere, so that's why we are dependent on the senses and the sense doors for this consciousness to sort of operate. Even if, let's say, the whole universe is gone, being obliterated, the big crunch, everything destroyed, it is believed, at least in the Buddhist scripture, all of us will be reborn in a certain Brahma world, in a certain very heavenly state without any sort of sense sphere kind of belonging. So it's at a very mind level. Yeah, so there is still a kind of consciousness around even without a body. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Karina.
So Bhante, towards this question, right? So if it's a consciousness around, right? So can we say that during the meditation when we reach the level of like 飞翔 is left, without a body or any of the feeling. So is it that referring to that consciousness?
If a person is focused on any level of concentration, first level all the way to the whatever level, they are not really focused on the senses. Yeah? So they are not really reacting to the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. Yeah? So basically, it's a mental level.
Oh.
So if let's say a person is distracted, they meditate, then after leg pain, then there's a moment jump to the sense sphere.
Oh.
So this circle very fast one, maybe work in microseconds or whatever it is, very fast. Then if you focus back on your meditation again, then you stop this, you stop at the, you stop the senses, yeah.
So one day without the six senses, right? This consciousness is still around, and then it happens also when we are meditating into the maybe like samadhi, this type, right? So this consciousness, is it the same consciousness that function? That because we are just aware that just aware only.
Conventionally, we'll say it's the same, but if you want to practice detachment, you have to perceive it as every moment as different. Yeah? Whatever you see in this second is different from the next second you see it. Yeah.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Okay. Last question, Bante. So if let's say go back to the first question that I asked, right? So perception, right? If let's say we have the right view, when we have a first contact, and then we are aware of the feeling, and with the right view of seeing things or hearing whatever not, right? So it won't go into the perception of this thing or that thing or whatever thing, and deep dive into the thinking. Can I say that? So if with the right view, right, are we able to stop the suffering?
Yeah, with right view, you need to accompany it with the right thought, the right perception, right thinking.
Understand.
Okay,
Bante.
no problem. So actually, you need all the Eightfold Path, all the right mindfulness, right effort, everything. Okay, Susan, you have something earlier.
I mentioned 10 perfections. Are they actually the same as the 10 paramis?
10 perceptions, not 10 perfections. 10
Oh,
perceptions.
yeah. But also my question is the 10 perfections the same as 10 paramis?
Yeah, the 10 perfections are the 10 paramis, yes.
Next time you will teach us on that, Monday.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that'll be after Karina, yeah.
Okay. Thank you,
Right.
Bante.
Okay, I need to jot that down in case I forget.
All in queue.
Yeah, so many.
KIV, whatever we want Bante to talk.
All right. Anyone else? Any questions?
Bante, so actually, sorry, I just was looking at this map again, and can you share with us exactly where does perception and mental proliferations fit inside here? Like, because there's all these other things that comes after feeling in this circle that's like craving, attachment, becoming, but that's not in the sutta, right? It just goes to perception. So it's like how does it fit inside here?
Okay, so if you look at the wheel, the dependent origination model, this perception and the categories of this proliferation come in between feeling and craving.
Oh, okay.
Hmm.
So, okay, so it's not the same as mental formations, because so exactly what are mental formations? Because when I read it, it sounded like a bit similar.
Yeah, that's why it's very fast. So when we think of something, the 5 aggregates is sort of like they work together. You need to perceive what you're thinking also. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll cover that in the next sutta, Cindy's topic. Okay, anyone else?
So when the sutta says mentions things like eye consciousness, ear consciousness, is that equivalent to consciousness in this wheel after mental formations?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, okay.
Bante, mental formations in Pali means sankhara, right? Correct or not?
Yep, that's right.
Thank you, Bante. Because I keep forgetting this word, and suddenly I recall, it seems like you ever taught us this word sankhara.
Yep.
There are so many Pali words in the Eightfold Path to remember. Don't know how to remember that. But every week we are actually chanting the Dhamma Chakapavattana Sutta. All these words will appear.
Okay, anyone else? Any questions?
Bante, okay, for this this circle, this cycle, right? It's actually all this is actually is all right if we apply actually the Eightfold Path into all this. That means we are actually heading towards the right kind of practice. It's okay to have like consciousness, like feeling, craving, all this, but we just apply whatever, like right thoughts, right view, everything all inside this circle. That means we are heading towards the right practice in the Dhamma?
Yeah, so the idea of applying the Noble Eightfold Path is to reduce craving. Yeah, because the Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path is the fourth Noble Truth. Yeah, it's the solution to overcome craving.
But Bante, if let's say you say craving, okay, if for me, if I were to be craving for more Dhamma, that means if I actually would like to actually engage myself in more positive Dhamma and along the way, is that also craving? But that is good craving, right?
Yeah, that's a good craving, yeah.
So even though the words craving actually is not very good, clinging and craving is actually more of the negative sense. But
Yep.
if let's say you apply it to the right thing, actually it's a positive outcome.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so
Okay.
the other term for positive craving, they call it chanda. So that is the positive kind of craving, yeah.
Okay.
So what we are tackling is tanha, the negative kind of craving.
Okay. Thank you, Bante.
Okay, no problem. Okay, anyone else from the floor? Okay, if not, how about the Facebook comments? Any questions? If not, then we go for a 5-minute break before we come back for the guided meditation. Huh? Okay, let's see who else has returned. So for Susan's topic, because the 10 paramitas is not really like in the suttas, not in the main Theravada suttas. So it might be just a comparative study only. Yeah, you might need to unmute yourself.
I saw this in the Palelai chanting book.
Okay.
So
So
actually,
this
I
is
can read from there.
okay. All right. No worries. There are lots of teachings on these 10 paramitas, but we call this post-canonical Theravada Buddhism.
But I can't remember which YouTube program I read. One of the Bhante say, keeping these paramis is very important. Yeah. So I haven't really dived into the chanting book to look at what is the reading. Yeah.
Okay.
Now I'm more reading on the Gatha, the what's that Gatha called? Jaya Mangala.
Okay.
It's all about Buddha's all the victories that he had won over. So one of them was like he won over the intoxicated elephant with his loving kindness.
Yep.
That's the one. Nalagiri, right? Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, no problem.
Sorry, Bhante. This is actually, to many, it's very simple, but it's an eye opener for me.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, which I've never ever read before.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so we can start if there's no other issues, no questions. And we can proceed with the guided meditation. So you find a comfortable sitting posture, make sure our back is upright and the rest of our body relaxed. Okay, then we are going to do same thing, very short visualization, just to get a feel of this mental formation. Start to visualize the hairs, all the hairs of your body, hairs of the head, hairs of the body. So when you visualize, there's a mental formation, and there is your mind or consciousness involved. And if, let's say, we never apply any right thought, when we think of the hairs, all kinds of stories, all kinds of memories associated with the hairs will come into play. So that is perception. And without proper Dhamma, without peace as a foundation, without happiness and peace as foundation, the mind will naturally cling to these dramas. No matter how bad it may be, how unwholesome it may be, the mind will cling to that story, cling to that emotion. So we are actually now trying to promote, cultivate this inner peace. So the starting point is to first wish all the hairs well and happy from head to toe. Sort of make peace with all these images. Every time we think of a new patch of hair, we wish it well and happy. New patch of hair, wish it well and happy. So the more we generate this right thought using this perception, we are creating more good karma, more merit. So when the mind is more peaceful, more happy, then that is a meritorious mind. If the mind is more distressed, more suffering, then this is the meritorious mind. Okay, if you find your mind relatively peaceful, calmer, it is due to reduction of conflicts in your mind. And we are now going to think of impermanence, reflect on impermanence, that is a different perception. And we are going to think of the hairs growing and falling, many, many cycles. And as we observe, as we loop this process of hairs growing and falling, we can also contemplate on the arising and passing of the 5 aggregates. So the hair is a form, and it changes, and along with the form there's also feeling. When you have young hair, what kind of feeling do you have? When you have old hair, what kind of feeling do you have? When the hair falls down, what kind of feeling do you have? And also the perception. When every time you generate a new image, then that is a new perception. You need to gather that image from your memory bank. How does the black hair look like? How long is the hair? What's the shape of the hair? All these are perceptions. And every time we generate a new image, that is a mental formation. And as long as we are aware of that image, we're using the mind or consciousness, contact with the mind or consciousness. Okay, then the more we reflect on impermanence, then we can observe whether the peace is it increasing or decreasing? Are we getting more distressed or not? Okay, then we can ask ourselves, are these hairs truly self? Is the sense of self increasing or decreasing the more we detach? Okay, then now we can move on to the four sublime states. Now we are not using visualization. We are using now the body sense door. We are going to feel all the sensations. Every time any bodily sensations appear, then we sort of wish it well and happy. No need to visualize. New sensation appear, wish it well and happy. New sensation appear, wish it well and happy. So there's four elements, are the earth, fire, wind, water elements. Any hard or soft sensation, hot and cold, fast, slow movements, moist, dry sensations. And together there's also feelings. Sometimes these sensations are uncomfortable, sometimes they're painful, sometimes they're pleasant. So no matter what sensation, what feeling occur, we make peace with them, wish them well and happy. So all like this repetition, once you stop applying the right perception, you'll be dragged by the wrong perception. You'll be assailed. Lots of these perceptions assail you. So the only way to defend yourself from Mara's forces, Mara's weapons, is to shield yourself with the Buddha's weapon. Keep turning the Dharma wheel, keep generating right thought every moment, every sensation appear, every feeling appear. Wish it well and happy. Okay, and if you find your mind calmer, then we take note of this restricted form of loving kindness. And now we are going to wish all beings in all directions well and happy, above, below, and all across. Cultivate a boundless heart, boundless loving kindness. No need to push the mind, let the mind extend naturally by itself. And again, no need to visualize. Once you visualize, then there will be perceptions, past memories associated with the person, past emotions, and that will contaminate the loving kindness. So what we're doing now is using a non-discriminative approach. We sort of treat all beings as the 5 aggregates, 4 elements and the 5 aggregates. So whatever sensation appear, then we wish them well and happy. We wish all beings well and happy. So now we change the phrasing. Instead of just wishing that sensation, we wish all beings. So the sensations can appear in the body, outside the body, near or far. Doesn't matter, as long as you detect something, then you wish all beings well and happy. Okay, so the more one generates this right thought of loving kindness, wishing all beings well and happy, and if the conditions fall in place, one may experience this right concentration, the first level of concentration, denoted by this joy and happiness. So that joy and happiness is not it's not derived from the senses. It's not like you see something nice, you feel happy, you hear something nice, you feel happy. So this is due to repetition of wishing all beings well and happy, and this inner joy and happiness appear like a byproduct. And regardless of what you experience, keep on wishing all beings well and happy. Okay, and now we add some insight, some wisdom, and we are going to reflect on impermanence. So all the sensations, all beings arise and pass away every moment. So every moment we use the sensations as a real-time evidence, observe how they arise and pass away. And mentally we can also sub-vocalize, we can reflect on it arising and passing as well, use whatever word or phrase associated with impermanence, kind of act as a reminder and to convert the observation into wisdom. Okay, and let's say that joy and happiness start to disappear, and if one experiences this neutral and refreshing kind of emotion, we call this equanimity. So this has double equanimity. One is the jhanic equanimity, and also the insight-related equanimity. So it's kind of two in one. And regardless of what you experience, keep reflecting on impermanence. Any phenomenon, as long as you hold and cling on to that, it will create this inner conflict, inner stress and tension and suffering. So always spin the Dharma wheel, keep reflecting on impermanence. So in that, whatever particular mental state or realm, even at the concentrative level, it is not dependent on your eye, ear, nose, tongue, body and mind. And there's no, at least no arguments, conflict, and quarrels. So we keep repeating impermanence until the mind is eventually free. The 5 aggregates, the 6 senses will always be there, always assail us. Okay, and before we conclude the session, same gentle reminder from the Karaniya Metta Sutta: as long as we maintain this boundless loving kindness in all activities, standing, sitting, walking, or lying down, and this is the noblest living. And with that, we can gently open our eyes, formally end the session, but informally still can generate right thought. Okay, any questions or issues? No one? All okay? Yes.
Yes. Can I check with you? When you say that to protect ourselves with the Buddha's weapon, are you referring to the 5 precepts and 8-fold path?
Yeah, that.
The weapon.
Yeah.
Buddha's weapon, is it 5
Yep.
precepts and the 8-fold path?
Yep.
Okay.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else, we can do the closing chant. Okay. Anumodana, dedicating merits. Akasata ca Bhumata Devanaga Mahitika Punyang tang anumoditva Cirang rakantu loka sasanang Etawata ca ampehi Sampadang punya sampadang Sabbe dewa sabbe buddha sabbe sata anumodantu Sabba sampati siddhya. Dedication of merits to departed. Idang me nyatinang hotu sugita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sugita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sugita hontu nyatayo. And aspiration. Imina punya kamena mame bala samagamo. Sadang samagamo hotu yavani bana patiya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, and we end off with 3 prostrations to the Buddha. First bow. Second bow. And third bow. All right, any announcements from Terence? If not, then I'll see you all next week. All right?
Thank you, Bhante.
No
Thank you,
problem.
Bhante. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night. Good night, Bhante. Thank you.
No problem.